Earlier this week, the New York Times fired a part-time editor over a tweet, although the paper says it was more than just that. Still, it raises questions over why an editor was let go over a mistake when a star reporter was kept on after it was discovered her ISIS reporting was based on a bogus source.
Lauren Wolf was a part-time editor at the New York Times who spent most of her career reporting on rape and sexual assault as a weapon of war.
I run a nonprofit journalism project about rape and war. It's called Women Under Siege.
Last week, Wolf was watching the presidential inauguration when she tweeted from her private account, "Biden landing at Joint Base Andrews now. I have chills." The New York Times promptly fired her and immediately received pushback from other journalists. Then the paper responded with this: "For privacy reasons, we do not go into the details of personnel matters, but we didn't end someone's employment over a single tweet." Still, sometimes critics compared the harsh treatment of Wolf to its lenient treatment of Rukmini Callimachi, host and reporter of the Caliphate podcast, who was duped by a phony ISIS killer.
I stabbed him. The blood was it was warm, and it sprayed everywhere.
Caliphate won a Peabody before it was discovered that the main character was a fraud. And even after the faker recanted, Callimachi stuck by the story.
We've been able to verify, I would say, the scaffolding of what he says.
And while the New York Times has retracted the core of the Caliphate story, they've kept Rukmini Callimachi on staff. Guess Lauren Wolf should have focused on mushy sources instead of gushy tweets.
Yeah, Dan Kennedy, this is a mystery to me. And there was another story that surfaced just in the last couple of days about an editor who took a student group on a trip and used to Pakistan, I think it was, and used racist comments. And it's all been acknowledged. And he says it was in context. God knows what context that was. But he hasn't. There's just an investigation going on. They let this woman go. They keep on Callimachi. I mean, I don't know.
Well, Lauren Wolf was a freelancer, and she claims that she was told, "Well, you're a freelancer. We can just get rid of you." And there you have it. Never tweet, right? This is just the latest in a long series of journalists getting into trouble over their Twitter feeds. This one seems to be pretty innocuous. We had just come through a violent insurrection incited by the president. I think a lot of people had chills to see this coming to an end and to see Joe Biden coming into Washington. It doesn't mean we're going to give Joe Biden a free pass, but I think that her tweet was understandable. Yeah. At worst, it seems like maybe she should have been taken aside and said, okay, enough. I also want to say that statement that the New York Times was put out was just terrible because it raises the implication without any evidence that she did some really awful things and that this was, the last straw. And I think that did her a terrible disservice because we really don't know what we're talking about.
Look, I think if it is because of the tweet, there is this sensitivity among major newspapers and news organizations as well that you aren't biased, right? That is the criticism that has been very loud, certainly over the last 4 years. And so maybe this is a sign to say, look, we're not going to tolerate this kind of thing. Yes, you can feel that way, but when you put it out, it sort of, supports all of the criticism from conservatives that, you're just going to throw softball questions now forever at the new administration. So perhaps that's what's behind it. Unfortunately, what you end up doing is you're treating something like that, potential bias, as a capital offense. And then when someone screws up, it's a misdemeanor. And I think that's unfair. But it is the nature of things these days in the news.
Yeah, not everything about the modern era in journalism is preferable to the way things once were. In the good old days, you pardon the expression, you would never have seen this tweet, and you would never have known about her getting let go. You might never have known about what was wrong with Callimachi's podcast. That's not good. It's better to know when information that you were fed was faulty. But look, the fact is we live in the time we live in. Dan's right. Never tweet. Keep your chills to yourself, particularly if you're in an editorial position where you're not a columnist or an analyst or something like that. You're really just supposed to keep that stuff private. I think the moral of this whole story is for people that didn't get this already, the New York Times is not a nonprofit enterprise. It's a business. And the people at the top of that company are businessmen and women. And they are going to make decisions that hopefully are journalistically sound, and kudos, have great respect for their journalism most of the time. But oftentimes they're going to make decisions based on business as well or in place of.
Let me pick up on that, John, because I would say, I don't know how many times I've been sitting in this chair saying this. If they like you, they're going to figure out a way around what the supposed rules were. Now, there are some journalism rules in place that we all need to follow. But then what happens in a scenario like this with the businessmen and women, they're weighing the weight and the value, if you will, of who is committing the offense. They just are. And Dean Baquet, the editor himself, said they're under criticism for treating the stars differently. So Donald McNeil, who you were referring to, Emily, the science reporter who went on the trip and used the N-word all over the place with these students and the parents complained, you know, they said they talked to him.
Right.
They talked to him and told him that was a bad thing. So then they moved the other woman off of the podcast because, for however they deem it, she is more valuable. And likewise, they're not telling Michael Barbara to go anywhere, even though he was a part of that. So, you know, at some point, folks are going to have to own up to that. And I always say, if you just like them, just say, hey, we made a decision because we just like them.
Exactly.
And don't ask us about it anymore.
Michael Barbera's fiance worked on the Caliphate, and he wasn't let go.